Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. How was your day? I hope you enjoy your day with the social distancing. Before I start, let me introduce myself first. My name is Zulfa Isnaini. I'm a student and now I study in Islamic University of Sultan Agung, majoring English education. On my podcast this time, I'm going to read a story. This is to fulfill an extensive reading task. So listen to my story until finish. Okay? Let's start it. The Tale of the Two Lives of Sultan Mahmud. It is related of auspicious king, the Sultan Mahmud, who was one of the wisest and most gracious of the Egyptian rulers, used often to sit alone in his palace, which dawned by a ghastly sadness and beholding the world black before his eyes. At this time, life was tasteless to him and without significance. Yes, even though Allah has given him, without stain, health and youth, power and glory, and for his capital, the most delicious city of the earth, where his eyes may vary rejoiced by flowers, serene skies, and women good like the waters of the Nile. These gifts were forgotten during 2 hours of royal sadness, and Mahmud envied the load of dredge bent over the forum, and travels lost in the waters desert. One day, as he sat with his eyes drowned in the blackness of dreams, in a dejection greater than ordinary, refusing to eat or drink or govern, desiring only death. And his grand vizier come to him, and in the chamber he dressed, saying,
Lord of my life, a very old man has come to our door for extreme wish, and solicits an audience.
If I may judge by his word, he is the great sage, the wise doctor, and the most extraordinary magician who has ever lived among the sons of men. Knowing that my lord is portrayed with sadness, I have dared to beg leave to let his old man into the parents, in the hope that he will dry away the gloom which lies upon the talk of our king. Sultan Mahmud nodded his head, and his grand vizier hastily introduced the stranger. At this point, Shahrazad saw the approach of morning and shortly fell silent. But when 820 night had come, she said,
There entered rather shadow of man than living creature of Allah. If there were a question of each with such a being, it would have to be given hundreds of years. For such clothing he wore a precious braid over his great neckness, and large leather belt bearing the parchment of his word lines. You would have taken him for one of those shapes which Egyptian laborers find in the graves of tombs.
Save that under the terrible weight portions of his brows not 2 eyes life's intelligence. This poor old man, instead of bowing before the Sultan, said in a hollow and inhuman voice,
Peace with you, Sultan Mahmud. I am sent to you by my brothers, the saints of the extreme west, to make you conscious of this gift which Allah has showered upon you.
Then, without gesture of obscene, he took the king by the hand and dragged him toward one of the windows. There were 4 windows in the chamber, each facing an astronomical point.
Open!
Commanded the old man, and when the Sultan had, like an obedient child, opened the first window,
Look!
Sultan Mahmud put his head out of the windows and beheld a vast army of fighters pouring down upon him from the mountain citadel, and moving northward. The first lines had already come to praise food and were climbing the walls, with a clamor for wealth and death. Mahmud understood that his troops had mounted and come to kill him. He changed color and cried,
"There is no God save Allah. This is his hour of my dynasty."
Immediately the old man shut the window and opened it again with the same movement. The army had disappeared. The cathedral stood and paced out the distance, breaking the noon sky with its miniatures. Without giving the Sultan time to recover from his exhaustion, the old man had led him to the second window, which looked down over the great city, bidding him open and regard. Mahmud opened the window and recoiled in horror. The 400 miniatures and the mosque, the demons of the palace, the 1,000 fair terraces stretching as far as the eye could reach. Well, Arwen flaming fire, flanked by crazy of terrors, and belching up black smoke to hide the sun. A savage wind whooped and flew toward the place, until the fresh building was only cut off from the red ocean by the fresh green of the gardens. In the great grave, the Sultan let drop his arms and cried,
"Allah alone is great. There is a destiny upon things, even as upon men. Tomorrow the desert will meet the desert upon a nameless plain which was today the first city of the earth. Glory to be the sovereign living."
He wept for his city and himself, but the old man shut down the window and opened it again the same movement. Only a bridge of fire had vanished. The city of Cairo stretched out in its main glory among a church of palms, while the 400 voices from the miniatures called the believers to prayers, and rose like in Christ to the Lord of all. The old man drenched to the third window, which looking over the Nile, and made him open it. Mahmud saw the new river had broken its bed and was having its water against the city. Already they had surprised the Hegel threats and were beating angrily to the place walls, a move greatly than all, threw down the trams and cast himself against the lower story in the palace. The building began to melt like a lump of sugar a cup, and was already dropping to one side, when the old man bent to open the window. He opened it again instantly and lo, there had been no food. The great river walked on majestically in its sleep between infinite great fells. The old man resolutely opened the fourth window, before the Sultan had time to collect himself after these three shocks. Now, this fourth window, look over the admirable plain of green which stretches to the horizon from the city gates. It is filled with running waters and happy folks, sung by all the poets since Umar. The fields are creped with roses and sweet basil, narcissus and jasmine alternative with ticks of orange, whose trees are the homes of doves and nightingales fainting for love. Sultan Mahmud beheld a red and white desert of terror burnt by inexorable sun. Among its aging rocks laden serving chicks and hyenas, fell snakes sped safely to and fire upon it. But when the old man had shut and opened this window, as the other, the plain smiled to the sky with flowers and gardens as before. Sultan Mahmud did not know whether he slept or wake, whether he had gone mad or been bewitched. But he shook, instead of following him to resolve this question in peace, led him softly to a little fountain basin which referred to chamber with the tinkle of its water.
Look,
Said he, and the Sultan leaned over the basin to look. With a rock movement the old man forced his head down into the water. Sultan Mahmud found that he had been shipwrecked at the foot of a mountain which overlooked the sea. Though he still wore the crown and attributes of royalty. A group of rockmen stood not far off, looking at him and making rude things certain him. Mahmud had no bones, but it was detected, more against the old saint than the lodging strangers.
oh well, magician,
He cried.
you have wicked me, but surely Allah will send me back to my kingdom that I may chastise you.
Then, pulling himself together, he walked toward the group of gaping from labyrinth, and he said more solemnly,
I am the Sultan Mahmud the Part. But they went on looking until their mouths were open from ear to ear.
"What mount? What caves?" The Sultan was about to tell rather than be eaten up alive, when one, who appeared to be the chief of these people, snatched off his coat and royal robe, and cast them into the sea, crying,
This hardware must have been very warm, poor man. Come, dress yourselfly, as we do.
He stripped the king's neck and forced him to put on a robe of coarse wool cotton stuff, a pair of old yellow sleeves sewed with hip-toed side, and a little bonnet of sad-colored felt.
Come and walk with us, poor stranger,
Said
said
he.
For in our country, he who does not work must serve. I do not know how to work,
Mahmud objected.
but you can be on us.
Retorted the man. Anyone can be on us. At this point, Sarah saw the approach of morning and suddenly fell silent. But when 821st night had come, she said,
His good magicians had already finished their day's work, so they were good enough to have someone to carry their toes.
Sultan Mahmud was obliged to strangers behind them their village, broken under the enormous weight of speech, horrors, wreckage, and risks. When he came breathless and fortress between the houses, he was on the butt of the crowd and night children, who pursued him with thousand insults. He was put into the siege stable for the night, and given an onion and some motley bread to eat. In the morning, he had become a papyrus, with hoofs and tail and trailing ears. They harnessed him for plugging and let him out in the field. When he refused to work, they handed him over to the miller, who soon tamed his spirit by beating him and making him turn the mill. For 5 years, he took the mill, with no reserve to snatch his ration of beans and drink a bucket of water. 5 years he suffered to gut the ticks, together with professions and curses, and had no relief and consolation except in the eternal series of words which he led from dawn to dusk as he tramped round. One day he will feel in upon hell's head, and he found himself returned to the shape of man. He was wandering among the markets of an unknown city and left very weary. Seeing that he was a stranger, a venerable merchant politely invited him into his shop. When he was stretched, the old man said,
You are young, and I do not think that you will be unhappy in our city. For young men come in for a deal of pitting here, especially when they are solid lads like you. Do you think of staying with us long? As Allah life.
Answer Sultan Mahmud.
I would stay in any place where they did not feed me beans. Beans!
cried the old man.
It is not beans, but strong salt for tying meats that you will be given here, and you will find them necessary. Now listen to me. Go and stand outside the hammam at the northern shore of this street, and ask every woman as she comes out if she is married or single. When one tells you she is single, you will become her husband instantly, for there is no law of our land. But be very careful not to omit a single woman from your questioning, or you will find yourself in grave trouble, for that also is a law of our land.
Sultan Mahmud hastened to the door of the hammam, and as he took up his position, beheld a delightful girl and 13 come down the steps.
This shall console me for all my troubles.
He took, as he went forward to address her.
Dear miss, are you married or single?
He said.
I was married last year.
She answered and went her way. The next to come out of Haman was an old woman travaying a cloth. Mahmud suffered with horror as he beheld her, and said to himself,
I would rather die of hunger or become as again than marry this terrible rain. But the merchant warned me, and I suppose that I better question this felt old thing.
So he turned away his head and asked,
Are you married or single?
I am married. Heart of my heart.
answered the belammed with a dribble. What a relief,
I congratulate you, good aunt.
said Mahmud, but to himself prayed a prayer that Allah might have compassion on the husband. As the old woman went upon her way, there a priest took the door of the hammam and came down the steps and antiquely, a monument of it, infinitely more disgusting the sea.
Are you married or single?
Asked Sultan Mahmud in a throbbing voice.
Single. Oh my.
She answered, blowing her nose in her fingers.
Gimli, now Gimli.
Cried Mahmud.
I am an ass, good aunt. I am an ass. Look at my eyes. Look at my tail. Look at my zip. Nice old woman, do not marry asses.
But the horrid Tom came up to him and would have kissed him. So he began to cry out again in terrific disgust.
Gimli? No, Gimli. I am an ass, dear lady. I am an ass. For pity's sake, do not marry me. Gimli! No, Gimli!
And, a sportsman's effort, he left his head from the fountain. Sultan Mahmud found himself standing in his palace, with his grand vizier on his right hand and a strange old saint of the life. Before him, one of his favorite girls held out, and a good sulphur, a cup of sherbet which he had commanded a few moments before the introduction of the sheikh.
Gimli! No, Gimli! He was a king. He was a king. He was terrible at first and only less during the moment his face and head covered with the water. He looked about him and rubbed his eyes. Gimli! No, Gimli! He was a sultan. He was a Sultan Mahmud.
He was neither shipwreck mariner, nor an ass, nor the husband of the redoubtable Muslim. As Allah lives, it was pleasant thing to be a sultan. He was about to speak, when the hollow voice of the poor old man addressed him, saying,
Peace with you, Sultan Mahmud. I am sent to my brothers, the saints of the extreme west, to make you conscious of the gifts which Allah has showered upon you.
Then the saint disappeared, and none might tell whether he had displayed by the door or by one of the windows. Sultan Mahmud understood the lesson of his lord, and started to think that this visionary method might have been the real insult of his life. He fell to his knees, weeping. He banished sorrow from his heart, and being happy, spread happiness about him. These are two lives of Sultan Mahmud, the one which was and the one which might have been. For with Allah, all things are possible. When Sarajat had made an of his tale, she fell silent, and King Sarajat cried.
That is a lesson for me, O Sarajat.
The wizard's doctor smiled and answered,
It is not to be compared with the lesson of the unending stir. I have never heard all that tears, Sarajat,
said King Shahrazad.